There was a lonely house in the middle of the woods near a small village. A long time ago, a granny lived there who was known for her potions and herbal collections. The locals believed she was a good witch, because she never harmed anyone, but cured many people of many diseases. Unfortunately, the grandma died. The old house had been empty for a long time, and then one of the hunters, Billy, noticed smoke coming from the chimney. He also saw that someone had cut the thick grass and nettles surrounding the abandoned building. The locals wondered who decided to move into that weird house near the swamp because the villagers said there was a ghost living there, so no one had ever picked cranberries near the swamp, although there were the largest berries there. One day, a woman with a child came to the village. The villagers realized that she was the granddaughter of an old witch who used to visit her grandmother when she was alive. However, at that time, she wasn't married yet. Living in the countryside was difficult, and living in an old hut away from other people was even more difficult. The woman probably had some personal reasons for this since she had chosen such a strange and mysterious place to hide. From that day on, people saw her at the grocery store almost every week. After all, they needed something to eat. Mushrooms and berries were not enough for a child, he needed soup and oatmeal every day. Tessa has always been a typical city dweller. She graduated from the University of Economics and became an accountant, but she couldn't find a job for a long time because all the employers only wanted experienced workers. However, the owner of a fast-growing company was sympathetic to the girl and hired her as an assistant to the chief accountant. Soon, she met her future husband, who was quite a successful entrepreneur, and a year later, they got married. At first, the relationship between the newlyweds was normal. When Tessa went on maternity leave, her boss was upset and regretted that now he would not see his favorite employee for a long time, but the future mother promised to visit them from time to time and help. The CEO's attitude towards the young specialist was good, even friendly. The elderly man treated the woman almost like his own daughter. Soon, she gave birth to twins. Her husband, Liam, was over the moon. But fate decided to test their relationship. One of the twins fell ill and died because of some unknown disease. Neither money nor expensive medicines helped. None of the doctors knew what exactly happened to him, science could not help. Tessa had a hard time coping with the death of her son, she suffered from depression. The woman lost a lot of weight, hardly slept, and constantly cried, thinking about her son. That's when their marriage started to collapse. Liam began to drink a lot of alcohol, cheat on her, and sometimes didn't come home at night. Tessa waited for her husband to come to his senses. She took care of the household and her son. But while her husband was drinking and neglecting his business, his competitors took action, and very soon, his successful business collapsed. The Internal Revenue Service had already sent representatives to seize the property, but they could not do it without the owner. Besides, they didn't want to kick a woman with a baby out on the street. Liam showed up at home unexpectedly and immediately started blaming his wife. The man said that Tessa was to blame for the death of their son and collapsing of a profitable business. And the fact that he drank and cheated on her with other women didn't matter. He was convinced that every man had a right to relax. Then, the man decided to take her baby away from her, strip her of her maternal rights so he could become a single father, and persuade the tax assessors to give him time to try to save his business. That's why Tessa escaped from the jerk to this remote village, though she managed to take a small amount of money so that she could survive somehow with her son. None of her husband's relatives knew about this abandoned house. He could find Tessa only by chance, and the villagers would never tell anything to the strangers. The locals would never spread rumors about their neighbors. Several years passed. Wesley was growing up, and life in the pristine nature was beneficial to him. Also, his great-grandmother's genes manifested themselves. The boy was not afraid of the woods and wild animals, and the animals never approached the child. In summer, he liked to walk in the woods for a long time, but he never approached the swamp. His mother had warned him that it was a very dangerous place. If he stumbled, he would be immediately swallowed by the swamp. One day, she even showed him the power of the bottomless swamp. They were collecting firewood for the winter and found a dead birch tree right at the edge of the swamp. Tessa dropped the tree into the swamp, some bubbles came up, and the 5-meter trunk disappeared in the murky water in a moment, as if it never existed. Wesley often saw that moment in his nightmares and woke up covered in sweat because of fear, therefore he was afraid to approach the swamp. One day, while walking in the woods, a boy saw a wolf cub who had fallen into a deep hole. A poor animal couldn't get out of the hole, and its mother hadn't found it yet. Wesley lay down on the edge and pulled the animal out of the trap. The cub was soaking wet and shivering, so the boy put a little wolf under his warm jacket to warm the animal. At that moment, a worried she-wolf showed up from the bushes. An encounter with a she-wolf could have ended badly for the boy, but apparently, his guardian angel was always on guard. The wolf cub warmed up a little and escaped from the hands of his savior with a joyful squeal. Running up to its mother, the little wolf began to whimper, as if begging not to hurt the boy. A miracle happened. The she-wolf only looked at the child, and then turned around and went into the woods with her cub. Since then, Wesley and the little wolf met each other often near the woods and played in the meadow. A few times the she-wolf appeared nearby, but she didn't come close, only watched from afar. A local hunter, Billy, often visited Tessa and brought rabbit or duck meat. Tessa also helped him, saving the elderly man from many diseases. The woman inherited a notebook with unique recipes from her grandmother, where her granny even indicated the places for picking herbs. Tessa made potions and supplied them to all the villagers. When someone fell ill, they begged Billy to go to Tessa for medicine. That's how the woman could get fresh eggs, dairy products, and other food because she had already run out of the money she had taken from her unfaithful husband. She survived as best she could. Tessa communicated only with an old hunter and a saleswoman. Since she had no money, she traded her potions and herbs for food. Also, the woman learned to bake bread at home and used honey from wild bees instead of sugar. Tessa learned about where to find honey from her grandmother's notebook. One day, when Wesley was already 6 years old, Billy knocked on her door early in the morning and told her that some man from the city was looking for her. "Please, don't be mad at me for showing a way to your house to a stranger," he said. He needed to talk to you urgently. After these words, a man dressed in a business suit and white shirt entered the house. "Good morning, my name is Henry. I am a notary, and I have to give you an official letter, which you should read later, preferably when you are alone. In short, you are required to come to my office on the date specified in the letter for the reading of the will." The strange visitor didn't explain anything else, he only asked Billy to walk him to the bus station, because he didn't want to go by car to the middle of nowhere. When the visitors left, Tessa sat down at the table to think about this strange situation. What will was the notary talking about? Tessa had no wealthy relatives. Her husband was young and healthy, he couldn't be dead. Besides, he could hardly bequeath anything to her, he would rather take everything away from her. When the excited woman opened the envelope, she read the official document and realized that while she was still living in the city, before she met her future husband, she got a job in a successful company. The head of the HR department didn't want to hire the young girl as an accountant because she had no work experience, but the CEO said he would give her a chance. Tessa was doing great at work, and once even saved her boss from death when he had a heart attack in the office. The young employee immediately gave him the right medication and then called an ambulance. If it wasn't for her, Brandon would have died right in the office. Fortunately, Tessa had taken a medical training course at the university, and then even worked part-time at the hospital near her dormitory. So she knew exactly what to do. After returning from the hospital, Brandon promised to thank his savior generously, but soon, Tessa got married, went on maternity leave, and then left the city to save herself from her husband. Only this businessman could include Tessa in his will because when she was hired, she provided her grandmother's address as her primary place of registration. That's why the notary found her, but he didn't dare to walk through the unfamiliar woods by himself and ask the locals to help, so Billy walked him there. Unfortunately, Brandon is probably dead, because she was invited to come to the city next week to attend the reading of the will. His relatives would probably be there, so there would be a scandal, and Tessa didn't want that in her life, which had been so smooth and quiet until now. Brandon was a very successful man, his company generated a good income, but his personal life wasn't as successful. His wife was ill for a long time, and one day, her heart failed and stopped. They had no children together. Brandon only had a son and daughter from his first wife. The man treated his stepchildren very well, but they never appreciated it. Arthur and Victoria lost their mother when they were teenagers, and they never really liked their stepfather, even though they could afford a lot of things only thanks to his financial support. The businessmen paid for their studies at a prestigious university and even rented them a nice apartment downtown. Arthur and Victoria were irresponsible when it came to their studies. They believed they would never need education and would never have to work because their stepfather's money would be enough for the rest of their lives. They liked to spend their free time in nightclubs and restaurants. The stepson even asked Brandon to give him one of the cars to take his girlfriends to clubs and bars. The elderly man realized that the behavior of his children was disgusting, but still, he covered their expenses, warning that the carefree life would last only until graduation. After that, they must survive on their own. Brandon was not going to bequeath the real estate and his business to his stepchildren because they would ruin everything in a few years, and they would probably sell the company to competitors for pennies. The businessman remembered his promise, so he bequeathed almost all of his property and business to Tessa, and only gave his children one of the cars, the one that Arthur was already driving, and an apartment in a luxury neighborhood where he didn't live. Brandon loved the fresh air, so he lived in a fancy house constructed according to a unique project. The plot was located near the lake, in a private neighborhood, and a personal driver took the businessman to the city every morning. Brandon had excellent employees who handled all the projects, while the CEO only supervised the business. A trustworthy person was in charge of the company. All in all, it was a great team of professionals who had worked together for years, and Brandon knew he could trust each of them. There was also a very experienced lawyer, who had already saved Arthur from various criminal cases. If it hadn't been for Brandon, the guy would have been in jail a long time ago. Tessa couldn't believe that she would become the owner of such wealth. Wesley had to go to school in autumn, but she had no money for a school uniform and all the necessities. But now she may become a very wealthy woman, except there will be more problems too. To enter the inheritance, it is necessary to go to the city, and this means that there is a chance to meet her husband, who has been looking for her everywhere for a long time to take away her son. The wise businessman assumed that Tessa might have financial problems, so there was money for the first time and a bank card in a separate envelope. When Wesley found out they were going to the city where they would permanently live, he wasn't happy. The child only asked his mom for time to say goodbye to his friend. "I don't think we'll need the food that's in the pantry. I mean the rabbit meat. Do you want to give it to the wolf?" "I don't mind. Say goodbye to your friend, because we're not coming back here anytime soon. We may never come back." "I'll come here on vacation," the little boy sighed. It didn't take long to pack, because they had almost no belongings. The letter suggested that she temporarily stay in the city apartment. The address was also mentioned in the letter, and the envelope contained the key. The woman said goodbye to Billy, asking him to take care of the house, and then they went to the bus station to get to the city. The first thing the woman did was to go to the nearest mall to get some new clothes, and then she bathed her son. While the boy watched cartoons after the bath, she enjoyed a hot bath herself. Then the woman made a cup of strong coffee, and the phone suddenly rang. It was the driver who had arrived to take them to the notary for the reading of the will. All the involved parties arrived at the office. Arthur and Victoria were sure they would get all the property because Brandon had no other heirs, so they looked at Tessa in surprise, not understanding what this stranger was doing there. When the notary announced the will, the brother and sister turned pale. Their stepfather had bequeathed them only an apartment and a damaged car. Arthur was shocked, for he had hoped to take his stepfather's new car from the garage. "Are you sure you read the will correctly? Aren't there any additions in there?" the stepson whispered. "I'm sure. For now, the heiress and her son can live in the mentioned apartment. But the will comes into force in 3 days, so Tessa will move into the house by the lake. And you will get the apartment, as well as the car that Arthur likes to drive at night." We can contest this will through the court, saying that our stepfather was mentally ill when he signed the papers, the stepdaughter shouted angrily. That's your right, but I would like to remind you that Brandon's lawyer will now defend the rights of the heiress, and this is a very experienced lawyer, he hasn't lost a single case. When the upset Arthur and Victoria left the office, the notary explained the entire inheritance process to Tessa. As I said, you will be the legal owner of all the property and business in 3 days. I will accompany you to the company office and introduce you to the employees. I don't understand anything about this business. I worked for this company as an assistant, but still, I don't know all the nuances. You will have reliable assistance. Brandon has taken care of that in advance, and all legal issues will be solved by your lawyer, Patrick. And you already know Albert, he is your driver, he will also help you. Tessa and Wesley had a fabulous start. In the morning, they went to the mall and bought everything a schoolboy needs, from a trendy backpack to a school uniform and comfortable shoes. Wesley was incredibly pleased. As Albert advised, Tessa chose a business suit and shoes for her first meeting with the staff. You know, we can never change a first impression. First of all, they will look at your appearance, and only then will they evaluate your business skills. But don't worry, after lunch, I will bring your assistants, and they will do their best to explain all the details to you. I'm so worried. Thank you for your help, Albert, I really appreciate it. The meeting with the assistants was very productive, they turned out to be quite young professionals. Brandon realized that the woman would not be able to immediately understand all the details of the business, even though she had a university degree in economics, so he prepared several trustworthy assistants. Brandon's deputy, Scott, was the leader of this team. He assured Tessa that the company was thriving and generating a good income because Brandon carefully chose each employee, and each project was managed by an experienced professional. We keep everything under control, and I will immediately report the slightest changes to you. At first, I'll be in charge of everything, but don't worry, you'll make the final decisions. There is no reason to worry, we have no strong competitors in this city, and other branches are doing well, though not as fast as we wish. Tomorrow, the notary will introduce me to the employees of the main office. I am very nervous about how the staff will accept the new owner. You know, everyone is only interested in 2 things, whether you will fire anyone or extend the working hours. We are not in favor of tightening working conditions. Every employee is reliable and does the job perfectly. In general, the whole team works smoothly and accurately. Brandon got rid of all the trustless and lazy employees long ago, only professionals remained, and that's why we have high salaries. The employees are not planning to quit after Brandon's death, because everyone values their positions, everyone knows each other, trusts each other, and we do not disclose trade secrets. We rarely hire new people, only when one of the women goes on maternity leave, but in this case, there is minimal access to classified documentation. After the meeting with the assistants, Tessa felt encouraged. Now, she wasn't afraid of the first meeting with the staff as much as before. Besides, Scott made a good impression on her. It was obvious that the man really loved his job. Tessa caught herself thinking, I wonder if he's married. A month had passed since Tessa had returned to the city. The woman had already mastered managing the business. She began her workday with a briefing with all the assistants, as Scott had advised. Then, she would listen to a brief report from the branch managers. And then, she would delve into the nuances of running the company with the help of the head counselor. Before lunch, Tessa would go to the accounting department to talk to the chief accountant. This is where she felt most confident. She had a guard who accompanied her everywhere, so no one could approach her on the street. She saw her husband a few times. Liam tried to approach her, but unsuccessfully. Tessa warned the head of security that her husband was a sneaky jerk. Wesley also had a personal bodyguard who drove him to school, waited for classes to end, and then brought the child home. The woman was afraid that her husband would try to kidnap her son to blackmail her, so she asked the lawyer to prepare the papers for a divorce, but her husband made such demands that she could not accept it. Your husband wants too much. He is willing to divorce you and not claim his son only if you give him 50% of the company's profits, but that's unacceptable. He doesn't have much chance, but he won't leave you alone because, by law, both parents have equal rights. He'll try to manipulate you. By the way, what about his business, is it prospering? I don't know exactly, but since he's demanding a share of your profits, his business is doing poorly. I can find out for sure. That would be good. In the meantime, I'll think about how to stop him. Do you have a reliable private investigator who can collect information quickly and discreetly? A week later, the detective put the investigation report on the CEO's desk. Tessa learned that her ex-husband had serious problems with one of his competitors, who could take over all his assets and bankrupt Liam, but he lacked some money to carry out his plan. The woman decided to talk to her deputy and ask how to resolve the problem with her husband. Scott asked for a couple of days to delve into the problem. On the appointed day, the man reported that he had a plan that was simple, legal, and effective. If they financially support her husband's competitor, the competitor would bankrupt the businessman. At best, he will be left with only a small house where his elderly mother lives. All other property will be seized and sold to pay off his debts. Given his financial situation, the chances that the court will give him the child are zero. Thank you, Scott, great job. And now, it's time to talk to him. Tell the head of security that I'm ready for a meeting on neutral ground. For example, in a crowded place, a restaurant would be a great place. Liam had not expected Tessa to agree to a meeting so quickly. The man was sure she would accept his terms and was already thinking about where he would spend the money, but an unpleasant surprise awaited him. You want half of my company's profits? Liam, I'm not the same Tessa who ran away from you years ago. Don't you realize it's not your wife in front of you, but a successful businesswoman with bodyguards and business assistants who can ruin your whole life? Tessa, I've been in the business for years, and you're just a beginner. I mean, how can you harm me? Don't even try to intimidate me. You'll only get a divorce under my terms, there's no other way. And now, I should go. Liam got up and slowly walked out of the restaurant. But he didn't get far, people in bailiff uniform approached him. They showed him some papers and then took the confused businessman into a black van. Where are they taking him? First to the court, and then to seize the property. His competitor fulfilled his promise. Your ex-husband is left with only a small house and a few meters of land to use as a vegetable garden. Patrick, when can we file for divorce? I have already prepared all the necessary paperwork and will bring it to the district court tomorrow morning. The judge's secretary will call us and inform us of the time of the court hearing. Everything will be fine now, don't worry. After getting a divorce certificate, Tessa decided to throw a party. There was a barbecue area near a gazebo in the backyard of her house. The woman invited all her associates to socialize in an informal atmosphere. Many of them came together with their wives and children. The table for children was set in a small garden, and she also invited children's entertainers so that the children would not get bored. Tessa noticed that Scott had arrived alone. The man was a couple of years older than Tessa, but it turned out that he was single. The woman decided to find out something about the life of her deputy. Choosing a convenient moment, she went to the veranda with the head of security and asked him about Scott's life. Scott was married, but his marriage didn't last long, as his wife was not happy that he was spending a lot of time at work. Back then, we were just starting the business, so together with Brandon, we worked from dawn to dusk. As a result, she filed for divorce 3 years later and then left the city. It took Scott a long time to recover, but then he devoted himself to the business. How long ago was that? It's been 5 or 6 years, I don't remember exactly. But I can find out. No need, it's not really important. Thanks for the information. I hope no one will find out anything about our conversation. Don't worry, Tessa, I've already forgotten what we just talked about. For many years, the woman lived only for her son, doing everything to make him happy, but she realized that the boy needed a father. Now that she was financially secure, Tessa decided it was time to think about her personal life. But she had nowhere to meet a decent man, for she didn't go anywhere but the office. That's why she focused her attention on Scott, the only single man she knew. They constantly communicated on work matters and were often alone in the office. She realized that her deputy would never allow himself to flirt with his boss, so she decided to take the first step herself. She was helped by fate, or rather by a planned event. Once, on Friday, after a morning briefing, Scott informed her that today was a shortened working day at the company because they had a corporate party in a nightclub tonight. Every year, we throw a party for all the employees. We party until dawn because there are 2 weekends ahead. Brandon established this tradition, although he has never participated in such parties. He used to say he was too old for dancing and drinking in a nightclub. I will gladly attend the party. But I will ask you to be my date for tonight if you have no other candidates for it. I have been divorced for a long time and only attend such events because it's my responsibility to watch them and make sure everything is fine. Taking advantage of my position, I am canceling your responsibility for tonight. I have never attended such parties. I really want to attend it, but not as a boss. I just want to relax and have fun. And one more thing, when we are alone, let's communicate as equals, not as a boss and a subordinate. Are you okay with that, Scott? I think your decision is absolutely right, Tessa. It was obvious that Scott was happy about this turn of events. Tessa's first corporate party went great. The subordinates felt a little uncomfortable for a few minutes, but an hour later, the atmosphere was already normal, everyone was having fun and drinking cocktails. But everyone noticed that Tessa and Scott danced together, chatting and laughing all night long. The relationship between them quickly became romantic. Although they didn't show it in public, everyone saw the sparkle in the eyes of the strict boss when she looked at her deputy. One day, Tessa summoned Scott into her office for advice. I've been hiding from my husband in the middle of nowhere for a long time, and I'd like to thank the residents of that little village for their help, and for not ratting me out to my husband's detectives. But how to do that? You know, Billy often shared food with me and was the link between me and the villagers. I think I should give him a good hunting weapon. However, I don't know how to choose it, since I don't know anything about it. It's not a problem, my schoolmate owns a weapons store, so he'll help to make a decent choice. As for the whole village, we should think about what they're lacking. I've lived there and know what they really need. First of all, we need to build a first aid station and a new grocery store, because the building of the local store is about to collapse. We have a charitable foundation, so we'll allocate money for that. I have a friend who works in construction. He will build everything you need in the shortest possible time. 3 years passed, a small hospital and a store were built in the remote village, and all the residents were overjoyed. Billy bragged to other hunters about his new rifle. Life became joyful again, but only the old hunter knew who breathed new life into their village. Tessa's company was thriving, although she temporarily didn't run it because she got married and gave birth to a baby girl, who turned 1 year old in August. However, the young mother didn't have to worry about her business because her husband was coping perfectly well, and she was happy to devote herself to raising her children. They had a modest wedding, although almost all the employees were invited because they were like a big family. The paparazzi tried to shoot exclusive material, but the head of security didn't let anyone go further than the restaurant's entrance. Once, it was a cloudy summer day. Tessa was spending time with the kids on the second floor of their house. Wesley was already in 4th grade. Scott had given his son a laptop for his birthday so that the boy could not only play but also master computer science. The young mother was playing with her daughter with colorful cubes, and her son was trying to complete another level in the educational computer game, but could not compose a phrase correctly. Wesley, no rush, remember what your father taught you. Check your notebook, where you write down difficult phrases, and everything will work out. But now take a rest and play with your sister while I go out to the gate. There's some strange visitor there. A poorly dressed man with a 3-week stubble was standing near the ajar gate. He was trying to explain something to the guard. Michael, what does he want? He's wondering if we need a janitor. Looking closer, Tessa could hardly recognize her ex-husband in the visitor. She said without any regrets, "Let him go further down the alley, I remember our neighbor was looking for a janitor."
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.